Thank you. I am so excited to share with you guys that I have a special guest with me here today, Carol Campos. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you.
She, she is the creator and co-founder of the Divine Breadcrumb. She's also an amazing coach, speaker, blogger, podcaster. You're so many things. Did I miss anything?
Oh.
So, Carol, what is a divine breadcrumb?
Okay. Well, for me, and other people might define it a little differently, but for me, it's, out of the blue, and it's often when you kind of need something most, the universe sends you some kind of clue or sign or something that seems like a coincidence, but it's what you need to send you on the next leg of your journey, and sometimes can send your life in a whole new trajectory. So that's what I look at it. I mean, a lot of people will use the word coincidence. I don't necessarily believe that anything's a coincidence. So for me, I call it a divine breadcrumb.
I love that term, and I can completely relate to that. Especially, I also feel like sometimes when we're receiving these breadcrumbs or these signs, we don't often notice them at first, but a lot of times, in retrospect, looking back on it, we see, oh, there they were, and then over time, I feel like those experiences help us to catch new signs as we're
Oh
receiving.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's so true. You look back and you can kind of connect the dots. And I think it's important to realize that not all divine breadcrumbs feel good at the time that they're happening. It can be, the death of a parent or some kind of tragedy. So you wouldn't necessarily feel like that's something divine, but it is something that changes your life and starts you on a new path. For me, the death of my dad was kind of unexpected 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago now, and it made me start thinking, kind of, what am I doing? Like, life's short. I don't know, when this is all going to end. So start focusing on what you want to do.
I'm sorry to hear about your dad.
Oh no, I'm sure he's up there partying, doing his thing.
Absolutely. And it's ironic because I had a similar experience, where my mother being diagnosed with a terminal illness really, I mean, I can't really think of how to put it any other way other than it cracked me open. It really did. It broke my heart. And today is actually her birthday,
Oh,
which is, it's very synchronistic.
yes.
Um, so other than the loss of a loved one, what would be another example of a sign that, or a nudge that someone might receive?
I think sometimes, well, if it's okay, I'll go back to my
Okay.
experiences. Often for me, it's been a chance meeting with someone. I tell a story. I met up with a friend from high school, and I hadn't talked to her in years and years, and we didn't even really travel in the same circles. We just happened to notice that we were commenting on a lot of the same things on Facebook, decided to get together for dinner. I had just ended a very tumultuous relationship that had gone on for decades, and it was finally done. And I was telling her, my I don't know, my energy is just kind of down. And so she had recommended at the time, hey, I know this woman who does Reiki and she's amazing. Well, at the time, this is around 2012, I knew nothing about Reiki, didn't know what that meant. And I ended up going to her friend, and then just absolutely loving this woman. Went back a few more times. The woman who was giving me Reiki said, hey, I'm going to be teaching a course for a certification for Reiki. Would you be interested? Like, would I? Yes. So,
Yeah.
so then that led to that. And then there was a girl, a woman rather, in my Reiki class who had recently lost her son through tragedy, and had developed mediumship abilities, and was like, are you interested? And I'm just learning this, so. And I loved all the metaphysical topics. I love. I'm just so down the rabbit hole. It's so fun. So it's just things like that. It would be, well, how about this workshop? And then at the workshop, well, here's this book. And it was literally following the trail. So, people, books are big. In my life, at least, I'm trying to think in other people's lives. Again, it's what seems like synchronicity. I feel like the first time you and I talked on the phone, little by
Yeah.
little, as we're talking, wait a minute, you do that? Yes, I did. It was just like, oh my gosh, this was meant to be. And you get that kind of buzzy feeling that you're on the right track.
I do too. I have the chills right now. Just
Right.
I want to back up a little bit because you referenced, you illustrated for us how a lot of times when we're being led in a certain direction, we receive one step and then another step and then another. It's pretty common, isn't it, that when we're being led in that way, that we often won't see the path ahead. It's really about surrendering to that guidance and following where we're being led, right? And just trusting that.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that was also a big one for me. I mean, I tend to be that brick to the head type person. The universe gives you a little tap, like, no, that's not real. I'm just imagining that. And then, and then it gets a little bit harder. And then for me, it would kind of happen in the form of a tragedy because I just wasn't, or tragedy, or just something that really just not a fun situation. But we don't have to learn that way. You're right. I mean, you just have to trust that what you're getting is real. And it often does feel like you're totally making it up. It feels like it's impossible, improbable. But as time has gone on, I've learned to trust that.
Absolutely. And that can be really hard for some of us. And I know that it has been one of the single biggest challenges for me on my own path is learning how to trust that, because so many of us we're all a product of our environment to an extent. And most of us are taught that what is external, what can be seen, is what should be trusted, when it's really the reverse, because everything that we see today started with the unseen, with the metaphysical.
Yes. And when I started learning that, and again, it's going back now, that's probably when I really started learning that lesson about 7 or 8 years ago. That was just mind-blowing to me. It just changed everything. And it's so empowering when you realize that you can start having control over some of this. Actually, all of it, if you get really clear, but that's a process.
Yeah, it definitely is. I remember the first time I ever read Ask and It Is Given by Abraham Hicks. I mean, the beginning of the book, a big, huge light bulb came on. I mean, it was life-changing.
Yes, and the goosebumps, because and for me, and probably for you, and I know a lot of people, when they get that feeling like of goosebumps, it really is the sign from the universe. Yep, this is truth. This is why your body's reacting. This is truth.
Yeah, absolutely. So every experience in our lives serves a purpose, right? And every experience in our lives shapes who we become. So what is the most significant experience you've had in your life to date that you feel has really shaped who you are now?
Oh boy, there's a lot of them, but I guess the biggest one was my long-term relationship with my now ex-husband. I went through so many changes. I mean, we met very young. We were, teenagers when we met, married in our early 20s. We were definitely not ready for that. He suffered from addiction. I was not equipped to deal with that. I was of the mindset back then, in my 20s, I love him enough, everything will be fine. Well, let me have a baby, that will change him. This is the mind of a 23-year-old for me back then. And nothing I did worked, and things were more and more out of control and spiraled more and more. Until eventually we were divorced, and we didn't see each other for a very long time. And when we did, it was probably about 7 years later. At this point, I'm a single mom. He had gotten clean, and I kind of recognized the person I originally met. Because of course, when I first met him, it wasn't craziness. It was, first love and all, and he's such a wonderful person, and he sees all this great stuff in me. And so when I saw him again, like I said, it had been 7 years, so a lot of the hurt had kind of subsided, and I could look at him with fresh eyes and see, like, man, this man was one of my biggest teachers, because I used to put the blame on him. If you really love me, you wouldn't be doing this. You wouldn't be an addict, and you would step up as a husband, as a father, as this, as that. And what I realized is, we co-create in these experiences. Again, I don't put a ton of blame on myself anymore. I did for a while, because I thought, wow, I was probably just a nightmare to live with too, because I had no compassion towards what he was going through. And it wasn't fun. So I think we were teachers for each other, and it helped me trust my instincts. It helped me be a more compassionate person. I think it helped me be a better mother. And now I can take a lot of these experiences and help my clients or people, kind of in my inner circle going through anything similar.
Wow. What a lesson, huh? And it's amazing because, it is often the relationships that cause us, at the time anyway, the most angst, the most pain, that are our biggest opportunities for growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. So to switch gears a little bit, for those who aren't as familiar with what you're doing today, how did you land in the work that you're doing now? And what is it exactly that you're doing?
Oh, gosh.
I know, that's a loaded question.
No, it's a great question. I love this question. So I think some people know my story, but for those who don't, I'll just make this quick. I had been in corporate for a little over 20 years, mainly on the vendor side, and mainly in more leadership roles. And then most recently was working for a Fortune 10 company as a manager. And it was around that time that my father passed. So that was kind of the catalyst. I was in a job with a ton of responsibility, a ton of stress, and I just didn't see it going anywhere, getting better. I kind of had that Sunday afternoon dread. Every Sunday, I don't want to do this. I'd pull into the parking lot and just let out a big sigh. I don't want to be here. And, it really wasn't, at first, I really blamed the job, but then I had to get real with myself and say, this isn't really what you want to do anyway. So my daughter's grown, I'm on my own. I thought, okay, if I'm going to make the jump, this will be the time to make the jump. So when I gave my notice, which it's almost a year, actually it's been a year that I gave my notice, and I left the job in April. And I, in my head, thought, all right, about 6 weeks, I'll have this figured out. I'll know what I want to do. It had to be my timeline. Well, I'm sure the universe got a big laugh out of that. The one thing I did know is I needed to work on myself, because I kept attracting kind of the same dynamic at work, where I did a great job. I was successful at what I did. I, got great reviews, this and that. But when it would come time to compensate me or promotions, oh, sorry, Carol, we can't really do that. But here's more work, because you do a great job. And so I wanted to figure out what's going on, plus other things, from, like, when I mentioned my past relationship, childhood stuff. I just really kind of wanted to get into it. So when I realized after about 6 weeks, after my timeline had passed, that, okay, you don't have this figured out, I had hired a coach who was a godsend. And we just started little by little, like, peeling away the layers. And I remember being really scared, gosh, what have I done? I was so sure, this feels so right. It still does, but I don't know what I'm doing. And little by little, as I was able to get myself quiet and and visualize and meditate and walk in nature and just get back to myself, that's when the ideas started coming through. So that's when the idea for the divine breadcrumb happened. So I'll get to that. But what I was thinking about, because I knew I was going to talk with you, is I'm kind of working on 4 different things right now. So, and it's weird because they're almost like steps in a stairway. So I have my writing, which is the first, let's just say that's the first stair, which is just me. It's a creative outlet. If people get something out of it, great. Then I'm doing the one-on-one coaching. So it's me, someone else, well, I'm the universe, kind of a co-creation, helping them on their path. Then most recently, I've gotten into kind of putting a foot back into corporate, not working for corporate per se, but coaching and consulting and teaching things like mindfulness, awareness, all the emotional intelligence components, all the things I love to talk about to help now the businesses kind of raise the bar for themselves. And then finally, that 4th stair, if you will, or step, if you will, is the divine breadcrumb, which now is more the global thing, where we're sharing stories of people all over the world talking about their most pivotal moments and some of the awesome things they're doing in the world to raise the vibration of the planet. So it's all different things, but it all feels very soul aligned and very on purpose, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Yes. So I want to back up a little bit. One of the things that you mentioned about the work that you're doing now is bringing that element of mindfulness, awareness, emotional intelligence in the workplace. Those are difficult to measure, right, in terms of metrics. What is the biggest benefit of bringing those type of practices into the workplace, do you think?
Well, I think the paradigms are shifting. The old paradigms in corporate are shifting. And I think, as much as we all love technology and all the cool things that are happening, I really think that people still crave connection and communication. And I think a lot of those skills have fallen a little by the wayside. And I think becoming self-aware, being more compassionate leaders, working together, having collaborations, improving your listening skills, all of those things so people can be heard, people can have a true partnership and work with each other and really understand each other. I think for me, that is so important to know that what you're putting out there is being heard. You're getting feedback from one another. It only makes us better if we have those understandings of each other.
Absolutely. And happy employees are productive employees, right?
Absolutely. And I think, obviously, like I said, I can be a little bit down the rabbit hole. That's not something, I'm not going to be going into it. Unless they wanted that,
Right.
But I think people tend to think that these softer skills, because there still is some of the old mindset, like, oh, that's not important, but you can bring these things to the workplace. Even things like heart coherence, which is a technique that I am certified in and teach. This is something that was used by Navy SEALs, by first responders, and it's all about getting centered, getting in a calm space. So if you're going into a meeting where you're going to be facing some maybe some confrontation, that you're getting yourself into a good place. There's practical reasons for doing these things. You can have these what are considered soft skills. I consider them more than that, but still, at the end of the day, your company is thriving and you're meeting your goals and your balance sheet looks good. It doesn't mean because you're incorporating these things that somehow everything's going to kind of, the business part of the business is going to go out the window. I think it only enhances it.
Absolutely. I know meditation for me is a practice that I implemented several years ago. And And it was life-changing in terms of significantly reducing my stress and my anxiety. And it's really part of what helped to actually lift the fog, you know, in terms of being so distracted by a job, a career that I was no longer fulfilled in doing.
Right, right, exactly.
So that's a good segue into my next question, which is, so for someone who is in a similar space right now, who is feeling called, feeling that nudge to make a change on their path, make a change in their career or anything else, what is the number one tip that you would have for them in terms of helping them to continue to move forward?
I think the number one thing is to get clear on what you want to do, because our minds are going a mile a minute, and there might be all kinds of things you're interested in. I actually find more often than not, people are not sure what they want to do. They're very sure of what they don't want to do, but not sure of what they do want to do. So getting that clarity, I think, is important. So in my case, I got a coach. That helped me. I know you have clients. I've started a practice. That's like my number one thing, is helping to get people clear. And from there, then when they're in a kind of centered space, clear space, then they can start making the decisions to take those next steps.
Absolutely. And what you said there is key as well. For me, I've had my own coaches or spiritual teachers throughout most of, this journey. And it's so important to have somebody in our lives who is kind of outside the bubble. You know what I mean? It's like our loved ones mean really well. Their intentions are always good. But unless they've traveled a similar path, it's hard to expect, it's hard for us to expect that they would completely understand where we're coming from, or to expect that they would be able to support us 100%. And so it's really great to have that person who can give us more of an objective level of support.
You're right. And I think that's such a good point, is find, if you go the coaching route, is to find someone who's kind of already walked the walk, who has already gone down that path. Because first of all, it just helps to know that someone really truly knows how you feel and came out on the other side and are doing well. There's so many different coaching styles, and for me, I knew I needed someone who wasn't really militant, like held me accountable, but wasn't just kind of firing things out at me. I don't respond to that. Some people, that's what helps them. For me, that's not what it was. So my thought is, whoever becomes a client, we're going to kind of be soul aligned. Sorry to be so woo-woo, but that's kind of how I feel. It'll be somebody who kind of has similar thought process, but wants to learn more. They might be where I was maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and I can share what I have learned, what's worked for me. And I go back to, it really is a collaboration with us, the client, and the universe. I mean, it's just not me telling it, we work together.
Yeah, it absolutely is a process of co-creation, for sure. So where, if someone wanted to learn more about you, where could they find you? Where can they find you?
So I can be found, obviously, on LinkedIn, where we found each other. So Carol Campos on LinkedIn. I can be found on Instagram at Carol_L_Campos. My website is almost done. It'll be CarolLCampos.com. And I'm trying to think what I'm missing. Yeah, those are probably the best places. And if anyone wanted to contact me, definitely messaging me on LinkedIn, direct messaging me on Instagram, or you could email me at carol@carolcampos.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today. And I know that when we talked about doing this together, it's really to show others, right, that there are more people out there than you think that are in this space. And we're on the other side at this point, right? You know, still figuring out our path, obviously, along the way, but showing others that, yes, you can trust your, you can trust your path. You can move forward without seeing the whole way ahead.